the names how you. Everyone is present except for Mayor Keithler. Commissioner Keithler. All right, next up, do we have any modifications or additions to the agenda? I am not seeing any. I would take a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I so motion.
There is a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Next up, we're going to learn how to use this system a little better. We have public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment to the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority? If so, please come up to the mic, or if you're online, please raise your hand. Do we have anybody online? Oh, we have people in the, you might want to admit people in the. Okay, we have admitted everybody who was in there in the waiting room. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment to the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority? I am not seeing any. Okay, we will close public comment. That's great. Next up, we have executive reports, co-chairs report. For my update, we are still looking for one more alternate. And if anybody knows anyone who lives in Washington that has, I would prefer someone with a finance background. That's going to be really important with this authority. Please give them your names and I will drive to their house myself. If not, we're willing to take any living body at this point. Commissioner Fox?
Yeah. Couple of comments. This is going to be a big month for us. We're going to be submitting our federal grant application next week. That's the big one for $200 million, and we're working to finish that. We're getting access to $5 million of federal grant, our state grant that we need to keep our cash flow going, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Work is progressing very well with the Progressive Design Build RFP that we want to issue out later this fall. The team did a review of it this past week for a couple of days, and I think that was very successful. Of course, we've got the core sampling program going on out in the river, and we're going to hear more about that today. We're working hard with the treaty tribes to try and break some actions loose there. And we've had a number of visitors the past couple of weeks from Oregon. We've had them out on the barge, and we've got 2 other people coming in this week, Rep. Sanchez and Senator Bonham on Tuesday, Wednesday of this week. So, and then in September, we've got the Washington State Transportation Committee coming out as a whole that they're going to want to meet with all of us. So stay tuned for that. Big month for us. So that's all I got.
How did the first 2 go that came out?
It went very well. We got a little video off the first one, which is Jeff Helfrich. And the second one, we kind of messed up. We didn't get a video, but it was Representative Frederick. But both of them went off very well. They're very, very supportive. What we're trying to do is I've asked Mike to take these core samples. Once they're done, we're going to break them up into 40 of them, about 4 inches tall, and we're going to hand them out to the legislators to put on their desk as like a paperweight, and hopefully remind them of the importance of our bridge every day for them.
Are they mud?
No, no, they're a rock party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a little-
If they don't vote for us, we'll give them the mud
I'll
part.
give them mud.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none. All right, let's go to the bridge update report.
So as Mike said, we're working through with WashDOT and ODOT on the agreements for the money that they allocated this year for this biennium. So we'll continue to work with them to bring that money to the project. We also have that meeting with the Joint Transportation Commission. That's going to be on Wednesday, September 27th. So it will be at the Best Western. It'll be roughly a lunch meeting. They're going to be here from 12:30 to 3. So if you are able to make that meeting, let me know. And we'll get you scheduled for that. We continue to hear positive news out of DC related to the project. We were actually on a meeting the other day with some FHWA local reps, and they were indicating that the project was on an important project list that they were being asked about, which I think is a good sign. And then I was also on another meeting internally where we've hired somebody that used to be with USDOT, and he also mentioned that he's hearing a lot about the Hood River Bridge when he's in conversations at DC. So all positive signs for the project. And I'm going to go over the informational items now for that are on the agenda, but I'll go ahead and read through these real quick. The .gov site, we did get approval for that. So the .gov site is up. We will get that set up. We will get everybody's emails developed on that, and then we'll let you know when that's all up and running. So officially, you do have a new .gov site for the authority. It's going to be HRWSBA.gov. And that will be our new site for the authority. The geotechnical investigation, there was a note in the packet on some cultural resource material and some photos of that material. ODOT has notified all of the tribal members, and none of them have had any concerns or wanted to see any additional information at this point on that. So it didn't impact our ability to go ahead and move forward with the geotechnical investigation, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a major impact to the project at all. So, but we'll keep moving forward with that. We did have some positive conversations with the treaty tribes in this last week. We've got some meetings now set up with Yakima. They've put in an additional attorney on the project, one to deal with just the Section 106, and then a separate attorney to deal with just the treaty tribe MOAs. We also have gotten good feedback from Umatilla that they are going to be taking their version of the MOA to their council, executive council, on the 22nd of this month, and then they will follow back up with us on how they want to move forward. And then, sorry, yes, that was, I'm sorry, that was Nez Pierce. Umatilla, we have a meeting on September 12th with them. We were able to get another meeting set up to continue the discussions with them. And then Warm Springs, we're still waiting on the letter, but they have acknowledged that they're going to send a letter of support. And we're continuing to reach out to them to get another meeting set up with them. So looks like they're through their summer seasons, which becomes their difficult season. And they all said that was part of the reason we weren't hearing from them, is just summer's a very difficult time for them. But we have started to pick that back up. Just a reminder, we will have a public meeting and records training this afternoon, right after this meeting from 4:30 to 6. It'll be here in this room. So if you have not been through that, it'll be based on Oregon, since that's our primary place of business. So even if you have been through that on the Washington side, there's probably some good information for you on how there's some differences between how Washington operates versus Oregon. So we do have a PO box now. It's PO Box 1425 Hood River. So that is your official PO box notification. And then the biological opinion, I'm working with ODOT. They said they're about 70% complete. I'm waiting on an email back from them to find out when they're going to have all of that over to NIMS. They are pushing their schedule, if not a week or two behind what they were thinking, as far as getting all of that material over to NIMS. So I'm hoping this week I'll get a confirmation on exactly what date that will be submitted to NIMS. And then NIMS will do their internal review. They'll resolve the comments. And then we'll see what the submittal date is. I would say we're pushing probably that September 1st date right now a little bit, unless I hear otherwise from ODOT and FHWA. And then the aesthetics committee, we are pulling together, the aesthetics committee and starting to meet with the Columbia River Gorge Commission just to talk about members of that committee, and some framework for that committee and, putting some boundaries around what that committee's, function is going to be and how they'll be able to input into the project. So that's going very well, and, we'll continue to move that forward. So.
Comment on that one. I personally think it's really important as we define this process that we get it tied into some kind of a schedule, that we don't let this thing go on for 2 or 3 years. We need to lock that stuff down in 1A and not let it just continue to evolve into 1B and then into 2.
And that's our current goal right now, is to have all of that done by the end of 1A and know what we're doing. And that's part of the reason we're trying to start that now, is to get ahead of that and get that resolved. So it's not critical path.
Okay.
That's, yes.
So, I looked through the description of the aesthetics committee, and I'm not entirely sure, is this something that came out of a specific federal requirement, or is this, where did this come from?
So as part of the NEPA commitments, that's where this came from, to develop an aesthetics committee. It was a commitment within the supplemental draft EIS, and it will carry through to the final EIS. So it'll be a commitment that came out of NEPA.
So is it basically for compliance with the National Scenic Act, or does it have a broader import?
It's broader than that. It's just, it doesn't specifically talk about having to meet everything about the National Scenic, but that will be a big part of it, is meeting their management plan. But it's more of just they allowed the opportunity for them to input and not make approvals or decisions on it, but provide input on what some of the aesthetics look like the lighting, the barrier on the concrete. So there is some boundaries on what, they're not talking about what type of bridge, but just more the aesthetics features of the bridge. So that's what they'll be focusing on.
So there will be a stage at which the scenic area staff has to go through and determine if this is consistent. Thank you. And I'm just confused as to, it seems like there's kind of a weird overlap, that we're having this committee, which is free form, and then we go into, and we're inviting them to be part of this. And then we go into a position where they're the regulatory body and have authority to approve and measure consistency. So it seems a little odd.
So we've incorporated that group into it, and we actually had an early meeting of who would make that decision of whether we were meeting it. They actually were okay with the county. Often the county will actually rule on whether it does or does not meet it. I can't remember the gentleman's name. Eric might be great. He will be, the commission has basically said, if Eric says it's okay, then we meet the requirements, and Eric will be part of that committee. So we're hoping out of that committee, we get both things done through the discussions with that committee.
And who do we have on this board that wants to serve on that committee as well?
Yeah, we have not identified that yet. So I know Eric has said that he would like to be, and given his background, I think that makes sense. So we will open that up to whatever board members want to participate in that committee too. And the tribal members also need to be a part of that committee per the commitment of the NEPA documents.
So do we have an idea how large that committee we want it to be?
We do not yet. We were allowing some of the input from the early participants to see how big we want to make that. We're trying to keep it to a manageable group, that it's, reasonable size. But we have not finalized what that number will look like yet.
I'm sorry, one other question. So in the packet, directly next to that item was a signed piece of paper with Jake's signature concerning bringing a lawyer in. Is that for that or for something else? The page before that discussion. It sounds like it's something else.
I believe it's something else, yeah, because we haven't done anything on bringing a lawyer in for that yet.
That was the public records engagement letter. So for our training this afternoon. Okay, did you kind of mix in there with the open action items too? So let's move on to the budget report.
And we won't have budget reports. We'll do the budget reports at the second meeting of the month. So we'll do, okay.
Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from 7/24/23? Are there any changes? Misspelled names usually? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes. There is a motion and a second to adopt the minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion carries. Okay, move on to project goals to include in the RFP. Has everyone had a chance to review the project goals? Would anyone like to have any discussion on those project goals?
I just had a clarifying question, for number C, build the bridge so people can safely cross it no matter how they get around. I just didn't know if that was the essentially good way of saying that. I just thought maybe there's a better way of how, a little bit multimodal. Correct.
I think what was meant there is the ability to use bicycles and hike across, correct?
Would everybody okay with being, say, build a multimodal bridge so that people can safely cross it? Okay. All right, with that, this is the consent agenda, and we should have done them both at the same time. But we had good discussion. So with that, I would take a motion to approve the goals in the RFP.
So moved.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, motion carries. Okay, let's move on to unfinished business, the action items. My favorite discussion, the logo.
So we sent out 2 logos. We did get some feedback. Overwhelmingly, people individually liked what is the second one, but numbered number 3, because there was more than just 2 in the original setup. So if someone would like to make a motion to either have a discussion about it or move forward with that third logo, which is more the square logo, not the shield logo, then that's what we were looking for, was just a motion on which one.
I motion that we approve logo number C.
3. I second the motion.
There's a motion and a second to approve. Logo number 3. Is there any discussion on this? I always have a question. Why does the river have 2 blue things and a line between it? But I hope that's waves. So I'm just going with that. With that, all the different bodies of water.
Oh, so you haven't noticed this?
Yeah, when this Hood River is coming out dirty.
Water is much bluer than Washington water.
Oh, don't start. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table and too much discussion. All those in favor of approving logo number 3, please say aye. Aye, motion carries. Wow. Okay, public records policy and forms.
So we need, what's part of the development of the authority, we did, one of the items to create was public records policy and forms. We started with the Hood River County forms, also reviewed the ports forms. They're very similar to what Hood River County has. Reason we did that was because primary place of business is in Oregon and they had all the Oregon statutes and everything already referenced. We just put it in a new format, so it's just up for approval or discussion if there's any changes we want to make.
The only thing that struck me is there's a checkoff box at the bottom where you check off whether this is involved in, it says county or state. A measure, a challenge that's going to come in county or state court. And I would probably specifically state which counties and which states, just for clarity.
we can make those minor modifications. One thing I would say for public records, and this, I know nothing about Oregon, but in Washington, public records requests do not have to be written down. And so if any of you being a commissioner gets a request for public records, make sure that you take that, write that down, contact Mike, get their information, because the fines for public records violations can be severe and steep in a very quick manner, at least in Washington. But the water's bluer in Oregon, so I don't know. With that, would anybody like to make a motion? Somebody else like to make a motion to approve the public records policies?
I have one small typo, just to correct before we do that. On page 29, the first line, there's fee shall be $20 hour. There's a missing per hour. That's one thing I saw. And with that, I would move to accept the public records documentation, sitting in for Commissioner Keithler.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the public records policy and forms. Is there any further discussion? Is the $20 in statute, or do we set that?
We set that, so I would advise that once we have legal counsel, we have them read through this and make sure everything's in line. And then we'll make any edits if we need to, so.
Record. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, let us move on to the establishment of the interim committee and leads for the communications, engineering, and governance. I think most of us have been interviewed, and do you have the results of those interviews?
Yeah, and I don't have the actual results in here, but the general consensus of the groups were, and the recommendation I would make going forward would be for right now as the interim, until the formal ones get set up, would be to have Commissioner Fox be the lead of the engineering. And we may need to modify this title on here to have engineering in it. I know it's on the agenda, but I don't see it on the cover sheet. And then for communications, Commissioner Keithler, and then for governance, sorry, wrong word, governance, would be, Commissioner Babbitts.
All right. Any discussion? Any disagreements? Anybody want to raise their hand? Want to jump in charge of one of these committees? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion.
I move we establish interim ad hoc committee, what was the term? Leads. Yeah, of those three for those committees.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. Great, we are moving through this. And good luck to all three of you. New business, let's move on to the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority and Project Office Space.
So this was an informational item on the last meeting. We moved it up to an action meeting, and that would be just to authorize staff to move forward with negotiating. We've got two different locations that would kind of meet the requirements that we've put out here. One of them's included in the packet. The other one, I'm waiting on some additional feedback. It was a late call last week, offering up to make some concessions with their potential lease space. One of them is the Radcom space here, just halfway down the hill. The other one is the old Institute executive offices. So this motion is just for us to negotiate with them, come up with the best deal, and then bring that back to the board for approval. And this would be to move the RBMC headquarters over, as well as make it the new headquarters and meeting space for the Bridge Authority, and also house the Progressive Design Build team.
And just for clarification, it says for the motion, it would be have staff to work with the realtors. Are we working with realtors directly or the business owners directly?
Both. One of them is the owner is acting as their own realtor. The other one has a realtor. So the Radcom space, the owner, we've been dealing with directly. For the Institute location, it's been through a realtor. and the first year would be under our RBMC contract, just to allow the authority to kind of get going. And then at some point, it would allow for, that to be transitioned over to the authority, at whatever time we decide to do that.
Any questions or discussion?
Can you talk about potential durations and tying to available funding?
Yeah, so what we've talked about is going with a 5-year timing with option for a 6-month opt-out. If something would happen that the project did not move forward, we would be able to opt out of that lease within 6 months. So those would be some of the terms of that agreement.
Any other questions? Issues?
I have a question about the PO box in Hood River. Would that be maintained as the primary contact address for the commission, or would that transition over to the offices in Washington?
That would be up to the board to decide how you wanted to do that. If you want to keep both or if you want to change it.
Thoughts, questions, or do we want to talk about that right now? The only reason I'd be willing to leave it in Oregon is because we are licensed to do business in Oregon. And so having your PO box there while the people are working over here, I'd say a happy medium. And then the bridge makes some money while we go across it to check the mail. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to have staff work with the realtors for office space in the White Salmon Benton area.
I move we approve staff to bring a proposal for lease back to us.
There is a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. Okay, the raised grant agreement, staff report.
So we were awarded a raise grant. The next step in that is to develop the raise grant agreement. The application for the raise grant was actually put in under the Port of Hood River. Part of what this discussion is to be able to switch that from the Port of Hood River to the Bridge Authority being the recipient for the grant. That's what's called for both in the CFA and actually in the Oregon bill that created the legislation. This is just allowing us to and acknowledging that we need to go work on that grant and that the staff can go ahead and start to work with HRWSBA to finalize that grant agreement. And then we will bring the final wording and everything else of the grant agreement once it's finalized back to the board for approval.
Any questions, discussion on this? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we authorize staff to prepare the raised grant application.
There is a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, further back to discussion, please.
Just rather than application, just agreement would probably be better, just because the application process is already done. I thought I heard application, sorry. Okay.
Staff got that? Perfect. Okay, all those in favor of allowing staff to move forward with finalizing the raise grant agreement, please signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. Okay, next up, we have item number 6, reimbursement rules. Staff report, please.
Oops, sorry. So we drafted some reimbursement rules as part of the CFA. One of the first things is that the board is eligible for reimbursement, but not until there were some interim rules drafted. So we have drafted up some interim rules, again, based on somewhat local agencies in the area have used. And that's just up for discussion and a motion to move forward with those if you'd like to.
Questions, concerns, comments?
I read them a week ago before the packet, so I guess has it changed? It didn't change in this packet, right? Okay, so, okay, same one. Okay, so first of all, there was a discussion about Oregon, Washington, or Idaho being considered in stage. Why is Idaho in there?
The only reason I did include that was because the Nez Perce tribe is located in Idaho. So that was the main reason for me including Idaho.
And the other thing is, it seems a little bit overly difficult to get authorization for travel requiring the written approval of the chair or something like that. And I'm wondering, was that the basic model that you saw in all of these other areas?
Yeah, it was. And I mean, that's up to the board to decide what level of approval. I probably went more conservative than less. So if there's some leniency that they want to give there, then you could decide to do that differently.
I know for our county, we do out-of-state travel is approved by a vote of the Board of Commissioners, which seems, in a way, it actually seems almost a little easier than asking for a signature of the board chair.
So there's two things. In-state travel requires a signature by the board chair. Out-of-state requires a vote of our entire organization, which we might only get together 2 times a month. You know, for us on our county commissioner, we're there every week, sometimes 2 times a week. That's not a big deal. If we're only together for a month, that could be more difficult. That was going to be my question for the board is it good enough to get the written authorization? If you're going to go to DC, we all know you're going to DC. Should we require a full vote to the board or not for discussion?
Seems to me just a simple email approval vote should be able to suffice. That's my 2 cents.
Do we have a process? We don't have a governance process yet, though, that fully outlines the email thing, but I definitely agree with Doug on that's what we should get to. I'm not sure for these are interim rules, right? So we're basically trying to get something in place until we have a full set of rules. So I guess what I would suggest for interim rules that we remove the approval process for in-state travel and that you're simply eligible for reimbursement, and then for out-of-state travel that it be approved, that the trip be approved by the board, and then the specifics of it don't need a signature. That's what I would suggest.
By the board or by the chair?
For out of state, that the decision to participate in an out-of-state event is something that we all discuss anyway, right? We're not just spontaneously saying, hey, I feel like going to DC today. We're discussing and saying, yeah, we should plan this trip for DC in 6 months. That by itself should be adequate to qualify that for reimbursement.
I have another one. In the document, it talks about per diem costs. But we don't state where that per diem comes from. My history, when I hear the word per diem under FAR, there's a whole list of charges that you're eligible to be able to charge to. Where we travel, that may be kind of difficult for people to figure out what's the right charge, and then HNTB is going to have to go back and audit that to make sure. I would suggest we consider fair and reasonable with receipts, and that way we just submit expenses, and as long as you're
You're saying
And
actual
what-
expenses, right?
I'm sorry.
You're basically saying we submit actual expenses.
Yes.
And they have to be reasonable.
Yes, and the one caveat to that is probably alcohol. Not allow alcohol to be reimbursed.
Wasn't that in there already?
I can't remember.
I thought it was.
The per diem is only on the food, and so we went with the per diem, like for our county, we have low, medium, and high areas that it reimbursed for different lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know how you would do that the way it's currently written for the reimbursement, because we actually adopted those low, medium, highs. So I understand where you're coming from on actuals, actual expenses, fair and reasonable.
It just seems like actual is a simpler way to do it, and we're not talking about people who are on the road all the time. This is,
Right.
being on the road is an unusual thing. Asking someone to save the receipts and put in actual bills is just, that's the way I do it. Yep.
Yeah, either Oops, sorry. Either one is fine. We just put per diem in there as an option. But you can do actuals or per diem. We were gonna do the per diem for the federal requirements, which is what we use on our contract, and just do the expense form. And we were gonna create a form that people could use and just check off. That way it kind of auto populates for you and makes it a little easier. But you can do actuals too. So if you want to do actuals, that's fine.
You're talking about commission now, you're talking about your.
I just mirrored it after what we were doing as far as per diem, but you can do actuals or per diem, whichever one you want to do.
Well, I would say if they have a form that that populates and makes it really easy, that's sometimes easier than trying to not lose your receipts. But it's up to the board. What do you guys think?
For the amount of time we're actually traveling, which is not that much, I would say actual cost with receipts. If we're traveling a lot, then I could see maybe the benefit of a per diem, but we're not traveling that much. Yeah. And if we see over time that we are traveling, then maybe we change it.
I guess what I would add is, my actuals are always less than per diem and I'm cheap, so I suggest that we do it that way.
And I'm completely opposite of you.
He's-
Okay,
He's not setting the bar for per diems, right?
with that being said, does somebody want to entertain a motion with this discussion enumerated in it?
I just had additional question, if we are comfortable including tips or not, or if we're going to have uncapped tip amounts, or if we're just exercising our best judgment in that. I've seen enough receipts with ginormous tips and whatnot, that it just, I'm not assuming that anybody's gonna act irresponsibly, but if it's legally allowed, we'll make sure that we're covering our bases.
I would suggest we vote to use your own judgment. If we see that things are getting out of hand, we can always change it. But tips nowadays are a normal cost of business for businesses, and we need to reflect that.
Use the term fair and reasonable, right?
Fair and
So I
reasonable.
think that's very appropriate.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're relatively clear on what fair and reasonable means, because it's different for everybody. I understand what you're getting at generally, but just as a broad understanding of where that math roughly is.
I would offer up something south of 18%.
You're cheap.
Is that why you two sit next to each other? You're both cheap?
Fair and reasonable does change by person, and also sometimes there's a relationship that you have with the coffee person or whatever. I think it's more about the review process and what kind of controls that we have in place, as the commissioner going to be reviewing expense reports and calling out anything that might need to be for discussion. I think that's kind of an easy way to do it, but
I'll offer up a suggestion that probably ought to be written into this, is that HNTB will be collecting the expense reports. And I would expect Mike to go through them and sign off. If he sees, in his opinion, something's out of whack, he needs to bring it either to the chair or the co-chair for resolution. But I would expect that would be very infrequent, if at all.
I would still entertain a motion if somebody's got an idea.
In words, okay, so I move that we modify the proposal we have in front of us so that the reimbursements for meals, rather than being a per diem, are fair and reasonable actuals to be reviewed by HNTB and flagged if necessary, and that the out-of-state travel is based on a a motion for the trip to be made at this, at a Board of Commissioners meeting, but not an actual sign off by the chair. Oh, and alcohol, well, I thought it was already in there, but okay, that if alcohol, if there's not a specific prohibition against reimbursing alcohol, there should be.
There's a motion and a second on the amended motion for adoption of the reimbursement rules for the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. Let's move on to the Title VI policy.
Yeah, and just one thing on the previous one, if you have incurred cost, the CFA does allow you to go back to the date of formation, which would be July 1st. So if someone has, you can submit those if you choose to.
You mean like my poll expenses today?
Yes. Yes.
That'll probably be the first one that comes up, right?
I hope the tip wasn't too high.
All right.
Moving.
So the Title VI policy is part of just now being a part of the federal financing system. We need to have a Title VI policy in place. So we took basically WashDOT's, ODOT's, merged those together, took a bunch of stuff out that was state specific and created one that was more specific to the Bridge Authority. Again, this is an interim rule that will get legal review, but it's a place for us to start. And that's what's in front of you, is just a motion to use this as a starting point until we adopt final full rules.
Any questions?
I would move that we use this as an interim policy.
There's a motion and a second to approve the adoption of the Title VI policy. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, motion carries. Let's move on to the legal counsel request for qualifications. Go ahead.
Sure. So this one is, we put out an RFQ July 1st. We solicited proposals for legal counsel, for general counsel for the Bridge Authority. We received 3 proposals back. I'll let Arthur explain the details of that. But based on, I think, some discussion for the group, then we will need a motion on how to move forward with those proposals.
Commissioner Babbitts.
Okay, so everyone pay attention this time because you actually have a decision to make. So there is real content here. So we received 3 proposals. 2 of them we found to be non-responsive. In other words, they basically said for one reason or another that they were not capable of being our general counsel. That's what the RFQ was for, but that they were interested in making sure that we knew what other legal services they provided, because they provide services that they think that we may be needing in the future. And the reasonable reason to think that, people with bond expertise and that sort of thing. So it was helpful that they let us know that, but they were not responsive to the proposal. So that left us with one proposal that was responsive. And that proposal actually came as a result of a solicitation by Mike Shannon, which will become important in a second. So I'll get into the details in a minute, but what happened, we had a discussion in our group and we didn't come up with a unanimous agreement. And because of that, I thought that I would explain what the 2 sides of the discussion were. And I think it's going to be relatively easy for us to resolve it, but I just want to have the entire discussion out in front of everybody. So our committee included Catherine and Jake and myself, Jake Edwards, not Jake Anderson. By the way, I do want to thank Catherine and Jake for volunteering to do this and for reading the legal proposals. The responses to the RFQ are not exactly fascinating reading, so thank you for doing that work. Feel free to jump in, but just to summarize the response that Jake and Catherine made was that we put these out. Staff did the knocking on doors to try to get people interested, and only one responsive reply was heard, and that therefore we should accept that or we should move forward with that proposal. And that we're not obligated to do anything beyond, I think we could easily just do a year's contract and see if it works out. And that the need is so immediate for us to have someone reviewing all of our legal documents. Even like today, I was asking, it's like, gee, can we discuss this in executive session, or what's the story on that? So the need is really immediate, so we really can't afford the wait of perhaps reissuing and seeing if we get any other applications in. So did I do a fair job of stating your thoughts on it? My thoughts were slightly different, but not dramatically different. And I'm kind of moved by that argument and would easily accept the decision to ask staff to move forward with negotiating a contract with the party that was responsive. My only concern was that it's a little bit of an oddity in that this, so the way that this happened was that Mike has a good friend who's now the chair of the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. New Jersey DOT, thank you. Chair of the New Jersey DOT, and she had a prior relationship with this law firm that had done work for her when she was with the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. Good, I knew I'd get that in there. And that she spoke to this person who put together a proposal. So it's a law firm out of New Jersey, but they are working with Foster Garvey, who's out of Seattle, and provides legal services at times to the Klickitat County. So Jake has knowledge with them. So it's a little bit of an odd beast, just in that we have folks who currently are not licensed to practice law in the state of Oregon, who will be applying to practice law in the state of Oregon, but they're working with a company that practices law in Oregon all the time and is licensed to practice in Oregon. The individual attorneys are licensed to practice law in Oregon. I spoke with the city attorney of Hood River and the Hood River County attorney. Both of them were out of town, so it's a little difficult, but they both responded kind of at the last minute, so I haven't been able to follow through. But they had some suggestions for other places they would look if they were to knock on some more doors to try to get some more, some additional responsive proposals to match our RFQ. But the question for this board is, should we go with the wisdom Catherine and Jake had suggested, which is we really need someone soon. Let's get someone on board now and let's see how it works for a year. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, we can move on. Or should we do a little bit more door knocking? I think that's kind of the two possibilities. What I would suggest, rather than immediately, let's have a discussion first and then have a little bit of a twist on it. But I'm just curious to hear what the board members think about this.
Any other thoughts from our committee members? And thank you for taking a look at those.
I think Commissioner Babbitt summed it up perfectly. Either we go with what we have or we go back to the RFQ and look for additional firms that want to apply.
Any thoughts from any commissioners or alternates?
Yep. One thought I have is, with a firm in New Jersey, would it be lawyers based in New Jersey that are participating? And the reason I ask about that is I'm a remote worker. I know how the time zone thing works out. If all of our meetings are 2 p.m. Pacific time, we're going to be doing after hours work a lot with those folks.
So are you asking about whether their billing is going to be for after hours, or?
I think both are relevant, whether they will be participating after hours for themselves, and does that have a consequence on billing?
And so in their response, they brought that up and they said that they had no problem with adjusting their schedules to work with ours. Is that Catherine and Jake? That's what you recall, right? I didn't read that carefully, but I do remember there was a discussion. I thought, oh yeah, that's right. It's different time zone. That's going to be a pain. I do a lot of work with people in other time zones too, and I just gotten now to the point that I really have no idea what time zone people are in.
I've got a question. So the way I understand it, the lawyers would actually reside in New Jersey, or would they be residing on the West Coast?
So there are lawyers from two different law firms involved. The Foster Garvey attorneys are located in Seattle. The primary attorney is in Seattle. They have an office in Portland, I believe, but it wasn't where the primary person was. So they'd be in the Northwest, either Portland or Seattle. And then the New Jersey firm, I forgot what's the name again? Yeah, Decatus, D-E. Yeah, there's a double letter in there. There's double vowel, which is confusing. Anyway, so they would be residing in New Jersey and operating out of New Jersey, correct?
So the folks in New Jersey, would they either be licensed or get licensed to do business in Washington, Oregon?
So two of them have already submitted the paperwork to do that. And they said that the rest of the people listed, and they have like 6 or 8 attorneys listed on our sheet, would then proceed with the process, which from their description, again, I have no way to judge it, but from their description, it sounds like it's a pretty
Very qualified.
well, no, in terms of getting approval to
Oh,
practice in Oregon, that there's a generally easy if you've been admitted to the bar in one state to be allowed to practice in another. I mean, you saw what was the Joe Pesci movie? Yeah, My Cousin Vinny. Thank you. Yeah, that's where I get my law expertise from.
Okay, so both of these companies does one really home in on our normal governance type lawyer needs, and the other one is more on the specific, unique, big contract, construction design?
Yeah, so that actually gets into the suggestion that I was going to make. Foster Garvey has everything in-house from bond expertise to construction expertise to local government expertise. Dakotas has, they did several projects for New Jersey Turnpike Authority and related things in the area. So they certainly have the construction expertise. Their local government expertise would be not Northwestern style government, and Oregon, Washington are very similar. Oregon and New Jersey are not very similar. So I am a little concerned about who's going to be advising us on executive sessions, for example, that sort of things. So apparently Foster Garvey was not interested in applying for this by themselves, but when they were solicited by this company, they were willing to be a partner in this. So it sounds like they don't have the bandwidth to handle us. And that this was a solution to the bandwidth question. As I talk to attorneys, what I've been told is that there is a shortage of attorneys in the area, that governmental attorneys, many of the people in private practice have been swallowed by large jurisdictions to be in-house attorneys. So that's what we're running into here, that there simply are not a lot of folks available. And in the Portland area, almost everybody is conflicted and therefore not interested in working with us. And other than that, law firms simply don't have enough associates available to do this. Apparently, there are more attorneys available in the, I mean, this is basically where the equivalent of offshore legal services. We're outsourcing our legal services to the East Coast because we don't have enough attorneys on the West Coast, is what this looks like.
So when I take a look at the workload for the next 6-9 months, governance is going to be a big piece of this thing, reviewing policies, procedures, and so on. And that's a big chunk of work. But we've also got, I think, at least 2 other major chunks of at least 2 other major chunks of work. And one is, if we had legal counsel on board, we'd be running the grant through that legal counsel to make sure that we're squeaky clean. That's probably not going to happen since it's leaving the House next week. The next big one, which I wouldn't put out unless we've gone through legal counsel is the RFP for the progressive design build. And there's going to be a lot of work on that during the next 4 or 5 months that it would really be helpful to have a council in place. Right.
So, thanks. So let me get right to a proposal then. I think that I would withdraw the suggestion that we go back out and instead do a modification of what Catherine and Jake had suggested. What I am concerned about is who's doing what work and who are we talking to for each of these pieces, and which, especially for the pieces that we have to do in the very near future. So what I would suggest is that the board authorize staff and maybe a subset of the board, like you and me, for example, to have a phone conversation with the folks who submitted this proposal to talk through some of the complexities that we see and make sure that there is a solution. And if they can cover it, that we then have staff go forward and negotiate engagements with them. So that's kind of cut to the chase. That's my proposal.
Was that a motion, or would you like to clean that up a little bit for a motion? Or is there any further discussion or thoughts before he makes a motion?
I'm still confused of which firm is providing which expertise. It sounds like they both have expertise in the same thing. And if so, why on opposite sides of the country?
That's what I want to ask them. It is confusing. It seems to me like it's really a horsepower question that they're simply, Foster Garvey does not have adequate ability to sign on to do this by themselves. These folks were willing to pull something together based on a specific request from Mike. This wouldn't have happened. They didn't know about this going on. They weren't beating the bushes looking to say, hey, we should get involved in this Bi-State Bridge Authority in the Northwest because we want to expand our realm into the Northwest. It's simply people trying to help us out effectively, trying to put something together that will meet our needs. But we should talk, what I'm suggesting is that we talk through the details to make sure that they've thought of everything, that we've thought of everything, if this meets our needs, and if so, that we proceed with it.
If I may, maybe an alternative, though, is the amount of time that perhaps can elapse in you guys getting in touch with these folks and hashing out these details could also be time spent knocking on doors for additional opportunities. So I'm wondering if there's a way to parallel track these things. If we already have an RFQ that's created, we don't have to do the work to do that. What is the harm in doing both things at once, gaining clarity from the folks that we think we want to hire on, but also going out and making some efforts to knock on more doors? As long as whatever discussion you're intending to have with them is not specifically a contractual agreement, then we have no reason we couldn't continue to go out and search for other options. My worry is just, understanding some of the timelines, especially with intergovernmental agreements and things and money that's sitting at the port that needs to be in our, these are all things that are important that we need to keep, move forward on. So if there's someone, I know that only 3 people responded, but perhaps there's somebody else out there. I don't know why we would necessarily stop the search while we clarify the opportunities with this one responsive group.
My only concern is once you open it up again, there's certain number of days it has to be posted and it has to go back out, and you have to re-alert all the different people who did submit. And so there's a potential for protest, not that we're open and all that to protest, please, if but the amount of time that takes, having ears on the RFQ right now and all the stuff that's needed we need to sign somebody probably yesterday. And so that was where we were sort of that expedient nature, and knowing the RFQ process, understanding it and the time it takes. You're not just adding in a couple days here and there. You're adding at least 2 weeks, I would say, right? Kelly, would that be 2 weeks? Yeah, at least 2 weeks. And I think that's time, honestly, that we just don't have at this point. And another thing that I'm sorry. Another thing is, we were advised by another staff member that they did call quite a few people and they did, once they heard the project, nobody was interested. So there has been quite a few door knockings going on. And I just don't think the capacity issue with right now with the lawyer shortage is all the chips are against us. But we have a great proposal. I mean, they hit all the markers. They just happen to be from New Jersey. So that's just, that's the only thing.
Thank you for the clarity on that process. I was unaware of how that plays out and how it's not something you can just parallel track and do. So that's fine. That was more, I guess it was a question as well. And thank you for the clarity.
And we actually, this is sort of replayed a bit of a discussion we had in our group. And we thought it's like, okay, this is a professional services contract. So it's not like still protests. It's like, what rules does it have to follow? We should ask our attorney. Which was kind of plays into Catherine's point that we should probably move forward.
I personally think we've got to move forward. And we do it for a year. And during that year, there's nothing to say that we can't be contacting folks to generate some interest in the project for the second year when we go back out for a rebid. But there's a lot of stuff going on right now that I feel a little uncomfortable. We don't have that other set of eyes looking at it.
So I can make a motion then, convert what I said into motion. Is that appropriate? So I would move that we authorize staff to work with Commissioners Fox and Babbitts to have a meeting with the Dakotas law firm to validate that they are in fact, that they do fully understand what tasks we have in front of us immediately and are capable of meeting our needs, and that if we make that determination that we are authorized to go forward, and that staff is authorized to go forward and negotiate a letter of engagement with them.
Is there a second? So there's a motion before us to allow governance chair Babbitts and engineering chair Fox to work with staff and the law firm Dakotas, okay. And enter into negotiations thereupon their understanding and acceptance. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, you hit briefly on the informational items, but would staff like to hit anything further on that? Okay. Please, Commissioner Fox.
Okay, on the item of the Joint Transportation Committee meeting in September, I think the communication group ought to kind of take the lead to really organize this event, get involvement by as many people as we can, and start getting ready for that now.
Yeah, and just so a little bit of clarity on that. We are not organizing this. We can organize our side. They are the ones setting the agenda. We are being given 30 minutes, but we definitely can coordinate our side of who's going to be there, what we're going to talk about and that piece, but we're not the one putting on the event. So.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay, moving on, upcoming action items. Would you staff like to give us an update on the intergovernmental agreement with the port?
So I know the port is working on drafting an agreement. As far as I know, has not been sent to anyone. As soon as we get legal counsel on, I think that's probably number 1 or 2 on the list of things that we need to do. So they should, I think, be prepared to have something ready for us by that time. So that would be the first thing. And then the remaining items are really just placeholders for things that we will move up into action items as we get them developed. And they are just things that need to be filled out for the CFA or future bylaws.
comment on the intergovernmental agency, agreement. I'm gonna push tomorrow night that we get a draft from the port sent over here. As I'm on the port commission, I personally think we ought to have an opportunity to see a relatively mature draft to see if it's, how close are we, number one. So I'll do that tomorrow night. The second thing that I think we ought to be doing is part of that agreement is gonna be this zero cost loan from the port to our organization over the next period of years. I think we have to put together a story of how much we need by year to do what. And be ready to have that and negotiate back with the port. We don't know how much we need. And I think we gotta fix that quickly.
Any other thoughts on that?
So there is a remaining action item. At some point, Debbie was going to make a report to us on what funding sources were available, when and how, sort of what how we keep the lights on report. And that hasn't, I didn't miss that, did I?
Okay. I think everybody agrees that that's important.
Could we put a time frame on that? Like, next meeting, we ought to have what we think we need for the next 3 or 4 years by year. And we can always revise it, but we gotta have some place to start.
Staff will do their best for 3 or 4 years. I'd be happy with
We
2.
hired the best.
Okay, next up, we are blowing through this, so we might have time for both of our presentations. But staff has one more thought.
No, on the presentations, I am gonna ask to move the geotech presentation to the 28th. One of their members is not able to be here today. And honestly, we did not think there was any chance that we would get to it. But we went through this way faster than we thought we would. But they will be out, and the good thing is they will be done by that time, so they will be able to give us a full report on everything. But yeah, I would like to ask that we wait to do that presentation until the 28th.
Okay, so our first report or presentation is going to be project reporting and the dashboard. And if we talk to the attorney, we might be done early so we can get started on the next section early if we want to reach out to them.
I am happy to, I will send her a message now and see if she's available.
Who's running the project reporting and dashboard? Brian, are you online?
Yep, I'm here. I just need the ability to share, I think. I'll post my presentation here.
Brian, have you pressed the see if you can share?
Yep, can you see it now and hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Anybody needs to move around so you can view the screen, please feel free to do so. Brian, it's all you.
Great, thank you. All right, so this presentation kind of builds off Carrie's presentation last time, which is around sources and uses. He talked about how much money we need and where we're going to get it. Today, we're going to talk about briefly why we need that much money. So our project cost estimate to replace the bridge, how much of it is committed and when do we get it, and how are we tracking and reporting on what we do have. So as a brief introduction, I'd like to bring everybody up to speed with where our project cost estimate lies. We're going to go back in time to the last comprehensive estimate in 2021 performed by WSB and KMC. This is a class 4 estimate, we call that. So on the scale, an AACE scale from 1 to 5, 4 and 5 are more in the order of magnitude, or rough cost based on conceptual design, and conceptual design less than 10%. With a high range of expected costs. So that was based on the 2011 TSNL, adding in programmatic costs from the port and WSP to give a total of about $503 million. What's really important and why I want us to kind of dwell here on the past is the assumptions back then have changed quite a bit, and we're going to talk about how these assumptions have changed over time. Big one there, our delivery assumption in 2021 was design bid build. The class 4 estimate included a 30% of base construction cost contingency. There was an assumption kind of in the middle there of COVID of 4% per year on average for escalation, and a bridge opening in 2030 and demo complete in 2032. For specifically the construction piece, just want to note the base construction cost in 2021 was about $254 million. That was based on KMC's contractor style estimate, so a really good estimate style. Again, based on a rough concept, but they did a great job putting that together, and the escalation attached there too. So those you can see on the right table there, how those numbers break down and give us a total approximate construction cost of $433 million in our 2021 estimate. RBMC came on board in 2022. We created a work breakdown structure that kind of renamed the project phases. We adjusted the assumptions of the estimate based on some changed decisions. Specifically, in order to advance the project schedule, we looked at an alternative delivery and kind of an acceleration of the pre-construction process. So our bridge opening moved to 2029 and our demo complete to 2031. And we assumed an alternative delivery method. At that point, we weren't exactly sure which one. We still had to go through the process, but we knew it was going to be an alternative method. No change in 2022 to the overall 503. 2023 comes around. We extended our planning and lobbying costs. We started to incorporate bottoms-up estimates for project management and oversight. So our RBMC contract, we did a 3-year work plan. So we've included a bottoms-up estimate for that instead of an analogous estimate for that work. We distributed budgets to the different phases of a now chosen progressive design build delivery method. Our contingency was still there, about 30%. We bumped up the average escalation per year, specifically to kind of give us a little more cushion with the uncertainty from the COVID era. Next year, we'll kind of dial that in. 2023 project delivery, still about 433 million, slight distribution and where those numbers are. Escalation kind of went down a little bit because we accelerated the project. We moved some things between phases, but no major change to the overall construction piece. So that leads us to what we're going to do next year, 2024. We're going to probably do another comprehensive project cost estimate update. Project planning should be actualized at that point. Our RBMC team will do a complete bottoms-up estimate for all project management costs for the life of the project. During for the project development phase, which includes right-of-way permitting and design, we'll get estimates from both our progressive design builder and the RBMC team. Project delivery, one of the first tasks in the phase 1A of our progressive design build contract is to do is for the progressive design builder to do an opinion of probable cost and to provide a delivery schedule for that cost. So we'll have those new numbers. We'll also be able to remove the uncertainty of the COVID era escalation, since that will be behind us completely, and we'll be working on new escalations assumptions going forward. We'll be able to replace the contingency that was at 30% with more of a quantified risk reserve. And we will do what we need to support financial planning and the federal cost estimate review requirements, which include a Monte Carlo simulation for the project cost estimate. Any questions? I know I ran through it quickly. All the details will be available either in subcommittees or as needed, but that's the project cost estimate. Any questions on the project cost estimate?
Yeah. When is this? It says 2024. When in 2024?
So the progressive design builder will come on board in the spring of 2024. They'll be running through some early value engineering and alternative analysis, some base concepts for design. So I would assume that this process will take place at the end of calendar year 2024. Mike, Shannon, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's consistent. This will be towards the end of their phase 1A.
Okay, if no other questions, we'll keep moving on. This $520 million, again, we have distributed, sorry for the delay there, distributed as cash flow by fiscal year, by biennium, to give an overall spending plan. This is one of our internal dashboards. It's available on our project portal to kind of track our needs by fiscal year. We also have by month, by biennium. We've really taken a hard look at this as it relates to our upcoming funding needs. So some of you have seen this graphic. This just overlays that cumulative spending plan with our approximate summary of work at the top and our current commitments. We have $119 million committed from various sources. We don't have access to all of those at this point. We basically have access to the $24 million in grants, that tiny dark blue line at the very bottom. We're working towards agreements with Washington and Oregon to get access to $35 million that they committed to us in this fiscal biennium, but we have yet to have access to. And as you can see from the cumulative spending plan, we will need to have those available by the next fiscal year, 24-25. In addition, Harry probably showed this last time, we have a funding tracking dashboard. We're also creating a public-facing version of this that's more simplified and direct for transparency to the public. We're finalizing that with the communications committee, and we'll let you know before we publish to the project website. As mentioned a couple slides ago, we have $119 million committed. We've completely exhausted the use of one fund source, the HB 2017. We have 3 active grant sources available, 2 that are reimbursable, 1 that is cash in hand. We also have access to a little bit of total revenue that is assigned to pay for our lobbying costs and other non-reimbursables. But we have those 3 commitments that I mentioned before, Raise, Washington, Oregon, that we need to work towards getting agreements on so that we can commit funds and do the work. We're also tracking this on dashboards, monitoring our monthly and quarterly reimbursements to each of our available funds. As this expands, we'll add the additional fund sources to this tracking. So that was the quick. I thought I was only going to have about 5-10 minutes, so sorry I went through it quickly. But that's our estimate, the budget, how we're going to track performance. We'll have a monthly report. It'll be part of this regular meeting, the 2nd of each month, also available on our project portal or upon request or in the budget subcommittee. Are there any questions?
Since we have a couple minutes, do you want Brian to show you how to access the portal and where you can find the dashboard? Would that be
Yes.
helpful? Okay, Brian, can you pull that up and do that real quick? Hopefully it'll work okay through the Zoom.
Let me just get back to. I'll share a different
Mike,
screen.
while he's doing that, I think it'd be very helpful if you would publish to everybody written instructions how to do it.
Yeah, we can do that. Governance is yours. 2 things with that. One, we haven't set up the formal budget committee. It would be under the finance piece. So as we go through this next phase of setting up the actual full committees, we will need, if we go from 5 to 3, then we will need to determine where that falls, whether it goes under governance, and some people thought it should go under engineering. So there will need to be some discussions about how to consolidate that if we choose to consolidate to 3.
While he's doing that, maybe just as an overview, give you some other history of the financial piece of this thing. As I was involved in it all the way back to the very, very first day, and so were you, in putting this estimate together. So when we first put the estimate together, it came out to be 503 million, as you saw on the sheet there, and it showed a completion date of October 2030. 2 years later, removing the old bridge. Some of us got together and we said, let's make an adjustment. We think we know how to do it. We accelerated the end date by a year. So our official end date is October 2029. However, we did not do any adjusting whatsoever to the 503. Theoretically, you should be able to reduce your contingency. And your cost should come down as well, because you're not going to be there quite as long. Time related distributables will be shorter. So we've actually built in a year of inflation into hidden contingency, if you will. And we knew we felt that the construction approach had to be one of the most expensive ways to do it. That was our feel. So as we go through 1A, we are hoping that we guessed right, that the final construction technique that is used will be cheaper than what we had assumed it was going to be. So we built in a couple of extra layers of contingency. That's why the 503, we felt good. The first year, instead of 4% inflation, we were up in the 8+ range. So we threw in another $17 million to the project estimate, getting us to 520. Okay, so that's really what happened, and that's where we are today. So we'll see, but 520, we're hoping is conservative. There's a lot of unknowns that we're going to have to work through as far as funding and getting the funding where we need it, when we need it, kind of a thing. But we've started the project off in a good spot.
So just to poke at that a little bit, to just get a feeling for how flexible those numbers are. If, for example, we were able to find a laydown yard that was appropriate and therefore we could do pre-constructed spans and lift them into place, barge them up and lift them into place. Do you remember at all roughly how much cheaper that is than the cantilever construction?
Cast in place. There was some of us felt we ought to be able to save at least 10% of the construction cost by doing a precast. There's a bunch of caveats that we got to work through, but thinking about it, putting a poured in place cantilevered type of an approach to building a structure is incredibly expensive. If you have the laydown area and you can build a precast yard close by. If you can't, well, that kind of changes the math a little bit, but intuitively, that's got to be one of the most expensive ways to build a bridge, and that's what the estimate was based on.
Doug, you've got some spare space, don't you?
To add to that, I'll note that one of the upcoming presentations will be from the KMC team on staging and constructability of construction means and methods. So be a lot of good discussion and questions you can ask them, because they did the original 2021 estimate.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, just a general comment. During the RFQ proposal review, Catherine provided a great suggestion, which would be to have the proposals submitted beforehand so they could be reviewed as part of the packet, so that we could individually review them. And if we had questions, we can bring them up during the when the proposal is being made. So I just wanted to throw that out there as maybe something other people would like to see.
You're speaking to the presentations? Okay, yeah, we can do that. We can, if the board would like, we'll start including the presentations prior to the meeting. It was just, part of it is if you give everybody it, then they're flipping through it and they're not listening to the speaker. So that was part of the reason, but if you want them beforehand, we're happy to put them in the packet.
So I'll quote Catherine also. A lot of times it's really hard to read stuff that's up there. If we have it in our packet, we can view it on our tablets, whatever. Although today I can't get my tablet to load it, so maybe that's not a great idea. But in general, it's easier to be able to read it in front of me.
Yep, we'll make that change and start including them. Before Brian does the walkthrough of the portal, I did have one other question. Was we have the next upcoming presentations. Is there anything on here or not on here that one of the board members would like us to prep for and make sure we have a presentation on.
When are we gonna find out about committee assignments?
So that'll be part of our workshop on the 18th of September. So we'll have that discussion as part of that meeting on the 18th.
Mike, can you see the portal on the screen?
Yeah, it's up, Brian.
Okay, good. So our project portal, this is the landing page that anybody who has access to our internal project portal will be sent to. We have all of our document control and reports and things within this portal, but not everybody has access to all those spaces. We put a dashboards space right on the front that all users would have access to. That page just has a couple of dashboards. You can see the pictures on there. There's also our monthly financial report, links to all of those. So if you pulled up the monthly financial report, which would be in your packet, you would see a PDF of the most recent report from July. I'll have an updated report for in the next August meeting. And for example, the funding dashboard would pop up. You can scroll down, it'll load a Power BI dashboard. If it's too small on your screen, you can make it full screen or go directly to the page. So for example, can you still see the full screen, Mike?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. And this just has some basic interactivity with the data, so you can see how much of this 80 million committed of the total percent funding, their current fund sources, et cetera. There's also some of the things you saw in the presentation, our spending plan. You can look specifically at how much money we're going to spend during project delivery versus project management at scale, with tooltips to give you the fiscal year totals. Our budget sheet, if you wanted to explore every lowest nuance of our current budget based on HRWSBA. Let's see, let's pick an interesting one. So project development here, we have project validation. You could see how project validation is broken down. This needs to be refreshed versus preliminary design.
Brian, I think the screen's froze. Teams doesn't like, there it is. Okay, good.
Okay, so you can, this budget sheet just is an interactive sheet, so you could drill down into the individual budgets for items within our WBS, what of that budget has been authorized versus what's unauthorized and still available, how much of that authorized has been spent, and how much we think we'll spend for that current authorization. And so you can drill down into various levels of detail. If you wanted something more fun to play with, you have a decomposition tree that does the same kind of thing. And I'm sure it's lagging on your end, but there's buttons to press and more information available at each one of these sections. And for example, here, just what our WBS looks like. So that's an example for one of the dashboards. There's a funding and budget dashboard, our RBNC contract performance dashboard, similar with tables and performance curves. And we have a grant reimbursement dashboard that shows how we're spending the funds that we have access to. And those are the dashboards. Any questions?
So all of you should have access to these. That was part of that portofhoodriver.com link that we sent out, and you got a password and username for. So feel free to get in and look at it. If you see anything or have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them or walk you through anything that is on any of this dashboards.
So Brian, when you when you report out once a month on status, of course, and we've talked about this, you're gonna have to spend a little bit of time to explain the particular dashboard you're looking at and definition of columns and how you use it. But more importantly, what the document tells you from a management point of view. Where should we be looking? Where should we focus in on? And of course, we're looking at 3 to 6 months out to anticipate problems. So your help in bringing that out would be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a good conversation today along those lines, and we'll have more going forward related to authority commitments, spending rates, and trends.
I did have one other presentation that I think you ought to get on here sometime in the next bit, and that's one on the project schedule. And you ought to get into it in a little bit of detail that what is our deliverables from 1A? And why are they important and when is it going to happen? And then in 1B, which is design, what are the key deliverables for design? And then as you get into construction, talk about sequencing, critical path, through the foundations and so on. So you want to bring out the importance that we have to hit that first in-water window dead on, or we're going to lose a year on the schedule. So really talk about that, bring it out.
Any other questions for Brian? Hearing none. We're good. She's on board.
No question, just more of a comment echoing, we built a much smaller project down here and the weather does play a big factor. So, Mike is accurate that concrete, something that has to be the right temperature to enact. And so hitting the right calendar dates, not date exactly, but the season is very important.
Okay, we are going to move on. We don't need to close the meeting, do we? We're going to include it as part of the meeting.
No, we'll switch when we do the training. It'll be actually under a different meeting, if that's what you're asking. But yes, one other thing is just the community events coming up. So if you haven't signed up or you would like to sign up and want more information on that, if you could just let Jessica or Stacy know, and we'll let you know all the details behind it. But those are coming up this week. So.
Okay. Sorry. All right, for the order, our next meeting will be Monday, August 28th at 2023. Time will begin at 2:00 since we were able to move through this so fast. Hopefully, we are starting a new trend there and making meetings efficient. We have no executive session planned, so with that, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. And a second. So there is a motion and a second for the adjournment. I will let the public know or anyone online that we, after adjourning, we will be entering into a new meeting for Public Records Act training.
Are we going to start that at 4:30 or are we going to advance that at all? I just need to let some people know that we're going to start early.
Why wouldn't we start it right? I thought that's what I asked you to do earlier.
Were you calling the attorney? I thought you were
So
texting.
I did, and I was going to give you an update on that.
Okay, so the attorney is good to go at 4?
Not available today. She can do anything before 2:30. She has a public meeting tonight that she can't skip out on.
So are we still doing the Public Meetings Act training?
The public meeting training is tonight. The call with our new attorney will be sometime tomorrow.
Oh, that's, you misunderstood what we were asking.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry, we got two things there.
Yeah, I figured we were blowing through the agenda so we could all go home early and have dinner and stuff.
We still have the public meeting training.
Yes, and that's what I was trying to get you to say. Did you talk to the person so that we could get started on that? Is she gonna be available?
Not, because I was thought you were talking about the other attorney. I talked to her tonight. She is not available, but she is available tomorrow to talk to us. I will check on the other attorney starting early.
Okay, so we're not, I'm gonna take my prerogative and we will not be adjourning until you find out if we can do that. If we are not going to adjourn, I have no problem if everybody fits that we have a open dialogue and discussion about who wants to sit on what committees. I know we were,
If we.
are you gonna use Robert's rules on me right now?
No, I'm gonna explain to you somebody that they're gonna tell you in a minute, but you probably don't want to adjourn this meeting, because if you're starting the next meeting early, you're really not able to start a meeting early. So we should instead continue this meeting, let people join, and we can be talking about this material, and then it can become the other meeting when the meeting is scheduled. You can't start a meeting early.
So the way I do it in Washington is our public meeting, it would all be one meeting because we are still meeting together. We wouldn't even adjourn. That's why I was asking Mike, because he has more experience. So we have a motion and a second on the, now I'm gonna go back and use it against you. To adjourn the meeting, I would ask everyone to vote no when I call the question. With that, everybody in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Good job. That was a test. All those opposed for adjourning the meeting, say nay. Nay. Okay. Well, you should come to Clickitat County. We do it regularly. Okay, with that, while you figure out if we can go early on that, and we won't be adjourning the meeting, I'm gonna go with your recommendation. It's set for September for who wants to join what committees. We have our committee heads. Who would like to be on governance?
It's gonna be really fun.
What? Okay. Okay, so we've had some internal discussion on how many committees we actually need. Do we need that many committees, or can we mix and match those? Because governance might be very busy for the first little bit, and then it will kind of die off while engineering takes off. I would say after today, we are moving very quickly through a lot of this governance stuff, and HNTB is doing a great job so far on getting us through there. The other committees of the 5 were budget, and I'm forgetting the other. Operations. My personal opinion is operations doesn't kick in until 2029. Governance is going to move it into operations. So I have no problem getting rid of that, but how does everyone else feel?
You don't want to start ops before 29 because you actually want to have your plan in place well prior to having the bridge actually open.
But could that be considered part of governance?
The group itself, yes.
And I agree with you 100%. And then with the budget side, there was discussion about putting that engineering. And also some discussion about maybe putting that under governance. I'm more than willing to hear any thoughts.
I'll give you my opinion. I think the budget thing could actually be split into 2. One is operational cost for not only the governance, but the structure itself, managing the long-term effort. Whereas the other piece of it is basically direct cost of the engineering construction effort, the capital cost of that project. I believe that one needs to be with the engineering construction piece because it is so intertwined. We use the example of a 3-legged stool. You have scope, schedule, and cost. And the fourth leg actually is the necessary budget to provide on all of that, and how do you control it? I think especially in one A, it's gonna be really important that that team be knowledgeable of how the decisions are being made and how they impact the 520. And we can't go through multiple jurisdictions to very quickly find that out and provide feedback back into the organization. So I would really recommend the budget piece of the capital cost stay with the engineering construction piece, but the operational cost, which could include setting a policy of once the bridge is up, what are we going to be setting aside every year? Are we going to plan for replacement right now? Or are we going to wait for 75 years and deal with it then? You know, there's all kinds of things that especially you younger people are going to have to deal with, you know. That's what I would suggest.
So there's a suggestion that, oh, we got other ideas over here? Oh, yeah, surprisingly, it hasn't been too bad today with the. Okay, so there's been the suggestion that part of budget will move into the engineering side for the construction, and then the rest of the budget for operations would move into the governance subcommittee. Is that consensus among everyone? That makes sense? Perfect. Thank you, Seth.
The big question is going to be where you draw that line. I think, I know with the RFP discussions last week, that was something that I was struggling with, is what's your direct project cost versus what is soft costs, for lack of a better term. And how we get to that, I don't think anybody wants to pick that number right now. I think we don't feel like we know enough, which is probably true. But you might have to make some assumptions on that to do some sort of split like that.
I think this thing's gonna morph a little bit as we get smarter over the next 6 months.
Mike, why wouldn't you just leave all the finance and budget stuff together in engineering?
We can certainly do that.
I like the idea of leaving it all together just for that point that then you don't have to draw a line.
I don't see a problem with that, at least for the next couple of years. With that, is that consensus? Okay, now's the time where everybody actually makes some decisions. Where do you want to be and how much time do you have to commit, and who wants to go first? We know the chairs, so you get to choose on who you want to hang out with. And don't forget Marla's hanging out there too. She's just.
She doesn't often go so.
I think the time commitment is a pretty big question, especially for somebody like myself who's, employed. I think most people here are outside of this organization. But certainly for myself, I'm keen to be on the engineering committee. It's my background, training, professional life. And time commitment, I assume, is going to be fairly fluid as the project goes forward. We've already talked about things ebbing and flowing on the different committees. And I think having fewer committees is a good idea. I think it's going to be allow us to probably make it a more reasonable time commitment rather than all the interaction costs of all the committees. So I'll put that out there as my first sort of volley. I'd like to be on the engineering committee. And I would also say that my time is, as long as I have the ability to schedule it, I have a very flexible schedule professionally, and then it'll just be mixing in with family life, which is often less flexible when kids come off of elementary school and stuff like that, but we can work through that.
Let me give maybe some insight of what I think the time constraint and requirements are gonna be in the engineering side. Between now and the end of the year, the big thing, and we've already got kind of a committee going, is the RFP. Reviewing the RFP, making sure we're satisfied with it, HNTB finishes it, releases it out. The next big chunk of work, and it'll be several days of, you gotta be there if you're gonna play, and that's the evaluation of the RFPs. It'll be doing a lot of reading, a lot of questioning, and then there'll be 2 or 3 days of interviews. And those will be full days. And that'll probably happen somewhere in the January, February timeframe, those interviews. Once we're into phase 1A, to me, what I see, and I'm gonna want from the contractor, is a schedule of key milestones and key discussion items, like, as an example, setting the construction technique. Which, is it gonna be a precast or is it gonna be poured in place cantilever? We need to know what that drop dead date is, and then what's the plan to reach that decision? And that plan then dictates involvement of that particular period. There will be some other things like what the bridge is gonna look like, interfacing with some of these other committees. We'll have a schedule that says that, and that would be a meeting that you probably want to attend. And there may be, over a period of several months, 3 or 4 of those kinds of meetings. That's what I see happening for the next year. Then we get into design, and it's a whole different kind of a thing. We're gonna be monitoring what HNTB does as far as supporting, is our contractor being truthful with us, those kinds of things. Construction is down there a ways, we can figure that out. But the big thing for us is gonna be 1A. Setting the principles of what we want this thing to look like. If that helps.
Thank you for being the first to go. Seth, you get to eat first when that food gets here. Okay, let's make it a little easier. If you want to be on the engineering team, raise your hand. Okay, you got the names? All right. If you want to be on the communications team, raise your hands.
And I'll just.
We already voted.
She's already been appointed the chair of it.
It was Nathan and Jake, anyone else that I missed?
Okay, and who wants to be on governance? Okay. That's
Um,
So your governance? Yeah. And your governance?
So can I just, I've spoken to Mike about this. We are fostering a baby that was just born, and I have state requirements that I can't cross state lines without certain knowledge, because in case you're wondering, we're in Washington and I live in Oregon. It's like a dual state thing. It's so cool. So that's the only joke the whole day. You all missed it. So I've spoken to Mike about it, and that is happening very sudden. But that being said, I would love to be involved in the meetings. I just don't know if I can commit. I don't want to be a voting member on committees because I don't want to hold up. So talk to Mike, but yes, I would like to be involved in governance and engineering meetings, please, if possible, as I was before.
And so one of the things we can do with the governance, I think a lot of that is going to be reviewing proposals, and we're going to be, working with attorneys. And really the hard part of the governance thing is letting the folks who actually write the words know what your philosophy is. So you can definitely participate in that, even just by reading the stuff and giving a written response. So I think that worked fine.
And Mike, with engineering stuff, I just know you need, based on the RFQ for all the reviewing and the interviews and stuff, I just don't want to hold up somebody to send that seat. But if I can be there, I'm going to be there. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm happy to help out with that as long as it's not harvest time and cherries and pears kind
When
of
does it start?
dictate. June and July are really cherries, and then it's easier when pears start.
If we're selecting in June.
And I'll also offer in the interim, if there's meetings that need to take place outside of work hours, like, 4:30 or later, we can use our facilities down at the hill. So,
In January, February timeframe, the child can be in daycare, so there's where we are, yeah.
So the other thing is that these committees are not set in stone. They're fluid. If anybody takes interest in topics, we can make sure that the agendas for each meeting, because it's good for us to know the whole picture, not just our little pieces of it. And so anybody can move in and out of other committees and try to keep apprised of it. That's kind of my plan, is to take the whole big picture.
One thing I would suggest to think about is whoever is going to be on the engineering committee, you may want to think about making them part of your evaluation and selection committee. As I think the names we threw out earlier, there's a couple that aren't on the engineering committee, so we may just want to have some conversation about that at some point.
I'm fine having more members of the organization come be part of that. I still think, though, we gotta get ODOT and WashDOT to come play too.
Are we good to go on the food? Okay, we're going to recess for the next 8 minutes. So everyone, and Seth gets to go first, can grab some food, and then we will begin at 4 o'clock.